Patriots. I'm going to wait until someone comes in. Talking government shutdown today, or government reopening, I guess. The end of the government shutdown. This is what Ben wanted to talk about. I'm Joel Fieri. I'm here solo today. Ben's traveling for work. There's AC, good old AC. AC, you're the one coming in first these days with Carrie gone. Between you and Ben. So I'm going to show a couple clips here of different reactions to the government reopening and the end of the shutdown and what that means and who won, who lost. So I'll just get right to it. This is Dr. Steve Turley, one of our favorites here on This Way Network, and going to give you his take.
The Schumer shutdown has officially come crashing down. After 40 days of pure chaos, flights canceled, first responders unpaid, millions of Americans suffering, Democrats caved. And what did they get in return? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. That's not hyperbole. That's exactly what just happened. And the details are even more devastating for Chuck Schumer than you could ever imagine. Stick them at the very end of this video because...
Okay, so that's Dr. Steve Turley. He thinks, which is probably the general consensus, is that even in the Democratic Party, they're like, what seems to be, what did we do all this for if we were just going to give up and not get what we've been demanding this whole time? And but I wanted to give you Tim Pool, who I show you from time to time here, and they see you love Dr. Steve. Yeah. So this is Tim Pool's take. Briefly, I'm going to give this to you, and he's not so sanguine on it.
Shutdown is officially over, ladies and gentlemen. Donald Trump signed the bill earlier this morning or late last night, and you can all get back to work. The airlines are going to restore many of these flights. They froze the amount of flights that were being suspended with news of the government shutdown ending. Air traffic controllers are returning to work. Everything is getting back to normal, except for that whole, the economy is collapsing and we are screwed. And Donald Trump has offered up thousands of H-1Bs and 600,000 Chinese students coming to the United States because we are cooked. You know?
Okay. So, yeah. So Tim's not quite as happy as Dr. Steve is. But he does make some good points, and it's something that you don't hear a lot of voices saying this, but one thing that Tim Pool was saying is all of this did because we can't pass a budget, right? We got to keep figuring out these continuing resolutions because the Senate cannot pass a budget like it's supposed to, like it's constitutionally required to do. So we have to go through all this, and we're going to go through it again in January. This is the agreement that they reached is only through, I think, the end of January. And so we're going to have this fight again. And the point that Tim Pool was making is there's not going to be the pressure because of holiday travel. You know, the flights being canceled right on the eve of Thanksgiving and the holiday season put a lot of pressure on Congress, especially the Democrats in Congress, to get this thing done. So we kicked the can down the road enough for 2.5 months, basically is what they're saying, or a month and a half. So, and then in January, there won't be that tension. There won't be that pressure because if they're canceling flights at the end of January, it's not that big a deal. It's not like it is in early November, right? Or mid-November. So that was Tim Pool's point. Steve Turley's point was, you know, the base is angry at Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and all these Democratic leaders. And this is going to further exacerbate the civil war within the Democratic Party, which is the bigger story. Everyone talks about the civil war in the country, which is not, they're not wrong. But the first civil war that's going to have to be fought is in the Democratic Party, between the radicals that have taken over the party and the quote unquote moderate Democrats that are befuddled and scared to death of the people that they see ascending to the leadership of their party and winning elections in New York and now Seattle, right? The Marxists. The Marxists are taking over the Democratic Party, and the quote unquote just people who just want to be liberal, who don't want to be Marxist, are having trouble getting with the program, and there's going to be a big fight with that. That's the first fight that has to happen. So those are the two views on the government shutdown itself, and then the government opening back up. Tim Pool did make a very good point about the visas, the H1N1 visas that Trump is putting forth, signing a lot of visas for people from China, from Korea to come in. He's saying it's to train our workers as we start making computer chips here, as we start building ships here, because we don't know how to do it. We haven't done it in so long. This is Trump's line, the Trump administration line. We need to bring in all these foreign workers to teach us how to do it. The more experienced of us are saying, and then they'll go back. They're saying they're going to come in, train us, and then they'll go back to their country of origin, which, it's a big stretch to get most people to believe that in 5 or 6 years, after these workers are done training us in whatever it is, microchips or shipbuilding or whatever, that they're going to go home, that they're not going to be permanent, because there's no guarantee what administration is going to be in power at the time. And when it comes to immigration, it's hard for us to believe anything. So, and a lot of people in the MAGA movement are very upset about that. But as Tim Pool says, some people aren't upset about anything that Trump does. And another point that Tim Pool made is this is just the continuation of the Biden budget. We're still spending like crazy. There's a thought out there that the shutdown happened because we had to stop spending money because we're coming to the end of our rope. Okay, our debt has become so big that we may soon start to default, and if we could just take 40 days and not spend any money, maybe that give us a reprieve. So yeah, so there's a lot of different takes. For the most part, I know Ben was thinking this, and when he wanted to do the show on this, that the big story was that this is a huge win for the Trump administration. It's a huge defeat for the Democrats, which I agree it is. It really is. Tim Pool seems to think they're just pretending because they basically still have everything they had before. But, there's just optics is a big thing in politics, right? And this is a loss. This is the Trump administration winning a budget battle, the shutdown battle against the Democrats. And optics is probably the main thing. So that probably is the story. AC, you agree too. What do you agree with? Tell me what you agree with. Because I've thrown out two different sides here. But I think to me, it is a mixed bag because we did just kick the can down the road to the end of January. And really, who knows what the Democratic Party is going to be like in just 2.5 months from now. Because what's happening in the Democrat Party is huge. And it is a civil war with gigantic ramifications for the whole country. If one of our two major parties, the one that's basically owns half the country, is Marxist, that's going to be a big, big problem for the United States of America. It really is. And we better wake up to what it is we're going to be fighting in the political arena. Because this is a complete, what did Barack Obama say 20 years ago, close to 20 years ago, this is a complete change in the fundamental. This is fundamental change in America, and fundamental means what is this country really made out of? what is our fundamental, what are our fundamental values, what is our fundamental reason to exist. If that changes, folks, we've got huge issues in this country. So, like I said, I think it's a mixed bag. I think okay. So they got everything they wanted. Trump held the line. And then, yeah, New York scares me with Mamdani. And now I hear that just yesterday, the news came out that Seattle elected a Marxist mayor too, a communist mayor. So again, this is as hard as it is to believe, and as much as we could sit here and say we don't want socialism, socialism is a failed experiment. Socialism is on the rise. It's on the rise in blue states, and again, this is the battle, right? This is a Democrat battle we're talking about, a Democrat problem that if they don't get right will become an American problem. But socialism is on the ascendancy. A lot of young people, young Democrats, don't see a problem with it. They don't have the world experience, the lived experience that people our age do. They haven't seen socialism for what it really is because they've been lied to. I remember Milton Friedman said years ago, after the Cold War ended, he said, we just fought a 40-year Cold War between capitalism and socialism and communism, and capitalism won decisively. We proved that capitalism is a much better system than socialism. We've shown socialism for what it is, for the evil worldview that it is, the enslaving, the impoverishing, violent worldview that it is. And after that happened, after everyone saw that victory, after capitalism proved itself vastly superior to socialism, people sat back and decided, you know what we need? We need more socialism. And it seems to be the original lie, I guess, the original sin. I don't know. But if you look at what the Democrats were fighting for in the budget deal, it's not inconsistent with their move towards socialism and Marxism. It's really not. Nothing screams socialism like national health care, right? And the Obamacare subsidies were a big bone of contention. And really, thank God Trump and the administration held the line. The Republicans held the line this time. Finally, they held the line, saying, no, we're not going to do that. The SNAP payments is another thing. The S in SNAP means supplementary, right? It was there to just help people who maybe needed a little more help. You know, they're already feeding their families, but this is we'll just supplement that with extra. Well, when you start supplementing, this is how socialism begins. We're just going to supplement. Pretty soon that supplement becomes the main way that people are feeding their families. And they'll have someone, I think they had an extremely large woman a couple of weeks ago talking about the SNAP benefits and how she can't feed her children. And yet she's obviously feeding herself. And I think Adam Carolla made a comment on that and he was blasted for it, but it's true. This is the state of a large part of the left. It's just milk the government for everything you can. Put the government in charge of everything we possibly can, whether it's grocery stores in New York, buses, Seattle, who knows what's going to be in Seattle, probably the same types of things. And just more government. So that's where we're at right now. It is a battle between capitalism and socialism and communism, might as well call it what it is. And the capitalist side, the Republican side, seems to have steeled its spine. But on the other hand, the socialism side now has laid bare what it really is, and people are still voting for it. So we're at a tipping point in the country of which way this is going to go. And I think these midterm elections will be everyone says these elections are the biggest in our lifetime, and maybe every subsequent election is going to be bigger than the one before it. But these elections coming up will tell us a lot about the state of the country. And yesterday I talked about the book Shepherds for Sale by Megan Basham, about how the left has tried to infiltrate the Christian right with woke ideas, spending millions and billions of dollars buying off pastors and seminaries, and to get them to try and get their congregations and their worshipers to be more woke, and to buy these political campaigns to actually buy into the political action that the left wants to take to advance socialism, and how successful they've been. So coming up is going to be a huge, the election is going to be a huge bellwether for the nation. It's also going to be a huge bellwether for the church and for God's, for the body of Christ. Because really what this all boils down to, what this fight is showing us, this is the fight that the Bible talks about. And Jesus talked about it. And I want to give you the verse that may not at first glance be talking about the whole issue, but I think it really does. And this is Jesus on Mark 12, 15 through 17. And I'm going to make it a little bit bigger here. Hopefully I can. I've got new internet, or better internet. So hopefully I won't be all choppy and things are coming through. Let me double check that we're okay here. Right. So I'm just going to read it here. This is the story, obviously, of the Pharisees coming to Jesus and talking about paying taxes. So they're talking about paying taxes to Caesar. Should we pay or shouldn't we? But Jesus knew their hypocrisy. Why are you trying to trap me? He asked. Bring me a denarius and let me look at it. They brought him the coin, and he asked them, whose image is this and whose inscription? Caesar's, they replied. Then Jesus said to them, give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. And they were amazed at him. Okay. So most people use this verse to justify that, hey, we need to pay our taxes and we need to obey our government. But that's not what this story is about. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's is only half the problem, or is only half the answer to the issue. After he says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, he says, and give to God what is God's. Well, what is God's? And what does that got to do with Caesar? Well, I've said this many times. The nature of Caesar is to take the things that are God's. Think about it. Whether or not, what, even to the fundamental, how we see ourselves, how we are created. Mike Johnson's here. Saying hi to AC. Hi, Mike. How you doing? So think about all the things that socialism, this rise of socialism, and what the Democrats were fighting for. Really, it's really Caesar. They want Caesar to take what is God's. Even to the fundamentals. Go back to Genesis 1. What is the first thing God tells us? Be fruitful. Well, the first thing he does is creates us male and female. Well, he creates the earth, and then when he creates man, he creates the male and female. Well, we can see an assault on that. And that is God's. Our identity is given us from God. That is God's. But Caesar wants to take that. And Caesar wants to tell us that, no, that's not our identity. Our identity is whatever you say it is, right? Be fruitful and multiply. Caesar wants to take that away from us too, right? And the most brutal way is through abortion, right? But even the socialism, what it does, the economic system of socialism depresses the family, right? It disincentivizes people from having children. And so the more socialistic countries get, the lower their birth rate gets. And there goes all the ramifications for that. But because that's Caesar taking what is God's, right? down the line. Okay, who takes care of the poor? Who raises your children? We'll go back to the children. Who raises your children? Well, you're supposed to bring your children up in the fear and admonition of the Lord. But Caesar doesn't say that. Socialism doesn't say that. Socialism says, no, your children are not yours. They are society's children. Society will raise them. We'll have government daycare, government schools, into government colleges, and then they are to be faithful wards of the government. Healthcare, same thing. Everything you look at, every issue, when it gets down to its base foundation, is that tension between God and Caesar, between God and the government. The government wants to take what's God. That's why Jesus said, give to God what is God's. And we miss that. The Pharisees weren't coming to Jesus because they said, hey, we really want to know your views on taxation. No, Jesus called them out. Why are you trying to trick me? You don't care about taxes. That's not what you're asking me. You're trying to trip me up and get me to say something against Caesar. He says, I'm not buying it. That's not the issue. Caesar's not the issue. Taxes aren't the issue. It's what belongs to God and what belongs to us. And don't you dare let Caesar take what is God's. And so that's a little soapbox of mine that I've always had. That story. Jesus is making clear there are things that belong to God that we will not give to anybody else. And socialism, by its definition and by its ideology, there's no room for God in socialism just because of that idea. Because there are things, if there is a transcendent God, that they're eternal God, all-powerful God who created us for his purposes, then socialism has no basis. Because in socialism, the government, the state, is God, and you will serve the state. And that state will take things that are God's, and that's to the heart of the gospel, to the heart of this story that we believe. So, like I said, might be a little bit different take on, but that's the battle that I see when we go through these government shutdowns, when we talk about budgets, when we talk about policy. It all gets down to what is Caesar's versus what is God's. So hopefully we can put that in that perspective. And as we move forward, like I said, it's going to happen again. It's going to happen in a couple months, and it might even be more nasty than this time and more drawn out. So anyways, comments, you guys are having kind of a private conversation there. So let's leave it at that. Got a little more time here. But chime in if you'd like. If you didn't catch my show, I'm going to do a little promo here. Yesterday, try and find that on This Way Network. I also have my own little page going that I'll try and give you guys some information on when I can. And because this is really filtered down into the church, and a lot of the yeah, you're listening. I know I've had this conversation before. You guys have conversations, but yet you still are listening. And thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. So, excuse me. This book, Shepherds for Sale by Megan Basham, talks a lot about how, like I said, how the left, the hard left, is investing a lot of money to basically do the same thing to the evangelical side of the Christian world as they did with the mainline denominations, infiltrating them from inside, getting the church to accept all these leftist ideas that are basically taking away what is God's and giving it to the government. And it's a really significant book. It's a really significant thing that's happening now, phenomenon that's happening, that's going on, and it's very timely. And if you can get that book, please do, because these subjects really do dovetail. Because as Christians, we need to really decide amongst ourselves what is God's and what is government's, and we need to stick to that. And our leaders need to do that. We need to be able to talk about these in church. One of the reasons why Christians are so dysfunctional on this and so susceptible to this is because there's this idea in church that you can't talk about politics and culture. If you try and bring it up, people will, no, we don't want that here because that's divisive, or people will get mad. So we just don't talk about it. My old church, recently, the pastor was quoted as saying why he doesn't speak out on social issues. He says, if you don't speak out on social issues, it really frustrates people. But if you do speak out on social issues, it infuriates people. So he said, I'd rather have them frustrated than infuriated, which I understand is a conundrum. But at the same time, one of the reasons they're infuriated is because the subject is never broached. And we don't know how to talk to each other about these things. So when it does come up, it ends up being a blow up. It's kind of like in a family or in a relationship, in a marriage. If you have a problem, there's a problem between the husband and wife, or if there's a problem within the family and nobody talks about it, if it's swept under the rug, if it's held down, then when it does come up, there's an explosion because we've been in denial of this so long, we've suppressed this so long, just so we can get along. Just because of the right now, that when it inevitably does come up, like it inevitably came up with Charlie Kirk, when Charlie Kirk was killed, this is when this suppressed issue blew up in the church's face. And what happened, right? If you talk to anybody in the Christian world, they'll have a story one way or the other of how their church either talked about the Charlie Kirk assassination the Sunday after it happened. They didn't talk about it. They mentioned his name. They didn't mention his name. Based on that, I've heard all kinds of stories of people at my church. There was a couple that left the church because our pastor dared to mention his name and say we should just be praying for the whole situation. And they said, no, we can't have that. We're out of here. He was a white supremacist. He was whatever. And my pastor didn't really even take a side, but he was just sympathetic to the whole situation and everyone involved. But for that couple, it was just too much. And I was talking to my pastor actually this morning, and I said, good for you. You only had one family do that, because I've heard of other churches where a major portion of the congregation sometimes even got up and walked out, or let the pastor know, we're out of here. You didn't mention his name, or you didn't even mention it, or you mentioned his name and you said, that how horrible it was, and we're gone now. Those type of reactions come because we don't talk about things like this. We sweep them under the rug. We don't want them bumming our worship high or our feel-good sermon or whatever it is. And therefore we're dysfunctional about it. And therefore these not so little actually, but these efforts to undermine us, to infiltrate us from the left, are having an effect, because we haven't talked about this. We don't have our minds right on this. We aren't in tune with what Scripture says about these things, about social and political situations, that when this kind of thing does snake into the church, we're susceptible to it. So we have to find some way to civilly and calmly and intelligently, with grace, talk about these things, because they're coming. If this war between socialism and capitalism and the Judeo-Christian worldview ethic versus the Marxist worldview ethic, if that's coming one way or another, it's going to come in the church. It's either going to blow up in the church's face, or it's going to be dealt with because we've talked about it and we've been clear on these things. I hope that makes sense, because to me, that's what's involved in this whole political thing. And that was what the real story was behind the shutdown and the budget battle. So I'm out of time. Again, it went fast as it always does. And I will see you next week on Thursday. And take care, everyone. Thanks for listening.